Straight ahead on Law and Crime Daily. 14 firings and suspensions at Fort Hood following the investigation into the murder of Army Specialist Vanessa Guillen. A message to female soldiers who say they too have been sexually assaulted.
If any of them see this, I want them to know we believe you.
Olivia Jade speaks out about the criminal case against her parents, actress Lori Loughlin and designer Massimo Giannulli, but is her apology enough?
Plus, should evidence in the case against members of a family accused of killing a mother be thrown out? What led investigators to find her body parts buried on the suspect's property?
There was a presence of human remains.
Law and Crime Daily covering court cases from coast to coast. Welcome everyone to Law and Crime Daily. I'm Brian Buckmire along with Terri Austin. The U.S. Army announced sweeping changes following an investigation into the murder of one of their own. Specialist Vanessa Guillen was bludgeoned to death inside Fort Hood, Texas earlier this year. She disappeared on April 22nd and her dismembered remains were found on June 30th. The suspect in the case, Specialist Aaron Robinson, killed himself the next day as police were attempting to arrest him. His girlfriend, Cecily Aguilar, is accused of assisting him. Guillen's family says she had been sexually harassed by an unnamed sergeant at Fort Hood, but complaints against the sergeant were dismissed.
The murder of Specialist Vanessa Guillen shocked our conscience and brought attention to deeper problems. The initial investigation into Vanessa's death, coupled with high numbers of crimes and deaths at Fort Hood, has revealed a series of missteps and multiple failures in our system and within our leadership. I am gravely disappointed that leaders failed to effectively create a climate that treated all soldiers with dignity and respect, and that failed to reinforce everyone's obligation to prevent and properly respond to allegations of sexual harassment and sexual assault. Because of this, to restore trust and confidence and accountability, I directed the relief and/or suspension of commanders and other leaders from the Corps to the squad level.
An independent committee spoke with soldiers and allowed them to speak openly about their concerns.
The individual interviews especially were pretty revealing. We interviewed 500, of the 647, 503 were female soldiers. What we found was that there was a fear of retaliation, all forms of retaliation, stigmatism, ostracism, career, derailing a career, assignments, work assignments, and that sort of thing. There was a fear and a founded fear that the confidentiality of the reporting process would be compromised. There was a fear, or there was a lack of any appreciation for the results or the response because it took so long to get an adjudication that people never saw the adjudication, so they lost faith in that.
The committee found a shocking number of credible claims of sexual assaults that were never reported.
As you mentioned, 503 of the 647 were women. We made a very concerted effort to interview every single woman within specific units, in particular the unit that Vanessa Guillen belonged to. And what we did discover was, which was one of the really shocking elements or parts of the interview period, were the number of unreported sexual harassment and sexual assault incidents. Of the 503 women that we interviewed, we discovered 93 credible accounts of sexual assault. Of those, only 59 were reported. And we also found 217 unreported accounts of sexual harassment. So that's a really significant number. Of those, just over half were reported. And so what we discovered during the course of those interviews is that due to the lack of confidence in the system, that lack of confidence absolutely affects the reporting of those incidents.
Joining me now are attorneys Dina along with Terri Austin. Terri, those numbers were shocking when you think of the numbers of reports and when they put in that word credible claims. That's pretty big to me. But 14 fired or suspended after the investigation, including commanders and low-level leaders. Do you think this cures the cancer, or do you think more needs to happen to cure this toxic culture?
Brian, I think so much more needs to happen. This was a 140-page report. That's pretty long. And you heard the comments there by Army Secretary Ryan McCarthy that this was a thorough investigation, but I think it uncovered some systemic weaknesses in the system. So, for instance, female soldiers, they were retaliated against when they reported the sexual harassment. So I think what we are going to need to do there is institute some safeguards into the system so that, for instance, people can report to an outside third party so they don't have to deal with this sort of retaliation that apparently is going on within the Army and other branches of our services.
All right, so Dina, a little over a dozen people get fired or suspended, but do you think there are potential criminal or civil cases that could stem out of these terminations, either by the victims or the victims' families?
Yes, absolutely. On behalf of the women, because there were crimes here that were committed. I think it's really important that they did this investigation, and it's a good first step because a victim here is a lot more vulnerable than they would be normally because the military is an enclosed bubble. They have their own criminal justice system. They have, as you see, their own reporting. If somebody wants to take this on as their career, there's not a lot of other places they can go. So it's very important that the military itself cleans itself up and protects these victims because they have maybe even less of a chance to get justice within the system with it so close.
Yeah, and I think we can all agree when it comes to the military, we shouldn't be using the word less when it comes to the concept of safety, security, and dignity for our men and women who are serving this country. I hope that this push to give them more transparency and more protection continues. Thank you both. And now to Ohio, where Law&Crime's Angenette Levy has details on an unusual case.
A strange smell coming from an apartment in Cincinnati led police to a man's body. At this point, it's not clear exactly how long that body had been hidden. Kenya Stallsworth and Robert Robb are charged with abuse of a corpse. Court documents say a John Doe died in a bedroom of an apartment, and Robb and Stallsworth covered the body with clothes to hide it and then tried to seal the room to keep the smell of decomposition inside. The coroner's office is not commenting on the identity of the man or the cause of death, but more charges could be coming. For Law&Crime Daily, I'm Angenette Levy.
Still ahead on Law&Crime Daily, federal authorities investigate the death of a man killed by police in Ohio. But first, the daughter of actress Lori Loughlin speaks out for the first time about the college admission scandal. Welcome back. An update in the college admission scandal involving actress Lori Loughlin. Terri Austin has more.
Jade spoke publicly for the first time about her parents' arrest, and not all were pleased. Loughlin and her husband, designer Massimo Giannulli, pleaded guilty to paying $500,000 to get their two daughters into the University of Southern California. Olivia, the younger daughter, had been posting on social media about wanting to party rather than go to class. She apologized on the web series Red Table Talk, hosted by Jada Pinkett Smith.
We had the means to do something and we completely took it and ran with it. And it was something that was wrong. And I think what a lot of people, not that it matters because nothing that happened was, it really can't be excused. Like on paper, it's bad. It's really bad. But I think what a lot of people don't know is my parents came from a place of just, I love my kids. I just want to help my kids. Whatever's best for them. I've worked my whole life to, provide for my family. And I think they thought it was normal.
Right.
And I think that there was a college counselor involved who seemed legitimate and ended up not being legitimate. And in that community, it was not out of the ordinary.
Right.
And it's embarrassing to say that I didn't know.
Now, Terri, no questions. Let's just talk. We know each other personally. I know you're a mother who has put kids through college. I'm still surprised at that, but I got to take your word for it. How do you react when you hear that this is how other people are putting their kids through college?
You know, Brian, I actually have mixed feelings here. You know, for many years, I was a single mom, and, you know, putting children through college is a lot of work, and we were definitely not privileged. And I worked very hard. We all did, to make sure that our children had a good education. So I totally understand feeling resentment towards people like Olivia and her parents. I mean, how can you be so blind to injustices and systemic racism that absolutely permeates nearly every institution here in the United States? But I will say this, having said that, I do think this was a step in the right direction. At some point, we all need to face the truth, and we all need to make amends. And I think Olivia tried to do that by going on the, you know, red table talk. So kudos to her for trying to make this step. And I just hope and pray that she continues to take these types of steps towards redemption.
Now, Dina, you're kind of in a similar boat. I know you have a son who's a sophomore, so you're eyeing college in the future. What are your thoughts?
You know, it just seemed like the timing was off for one thing, because students across America are dealing with education inequality with this online schooling. And so people are really suffering, not even just at the college level, but every level. So for her to come on with just like a simple apology that she didn't know better, to me just seems too little. Maybe she could have come out with some sort of platform that she was working on, or waited and given an apology when people are all kind of in a little bit of a better spot. The fact of the matter is that, yes, this probably has been going on for a long time, but it is wrong. And it just, to me, it just seems like the wrong time for us to really care so much about what she personally was going through, which is what she seems to want us to do.
Yeah. My 2 cents here is, I think most people who know me, I was a college athlete. I worked 2 jobs. I cleaned the tennis courts at night, and I cut the grass on the old soccer field where I was actually an All-American. So I didn't get a lot of that. And my mother was the one who put me through college on her own. And so really, I feel more disgusted for her than anything else. But that's just my 2 cents. I think everyone can bring their own opinion to this one. I think that's what's so great about this story. Thank you both for contributing. Coming up on Law and Crime Daily, why the death of a man shot by police is ruled a homicide. Authority says he was not the suspect they were looking for. Plus, we take you inside the courtroom where members of a family accused of murder are asking for evidence against them to be thrown out. Those cases after the break. Now to an update in a police shooting. Federal authorities say they'll review the shooting death of an Ohio man killed by a deputy. The Franklin County coroner ruled Casey Goodson Jr.'s death a homicide. The autopsy said he died from multiple gunshot wounds to the torso. The deputy was on assignment with the U.S. Marshals Fugitive Task Force looking for a suspect who was not Goodson. Law enforcement officials say Goodson was waving a gun, but his family says he was carrying a sandwich bag and was walking into his home when he was shot. Terry, the investigation haven't given us much yet, but the most shocking account that I've heard so far from the family is that he was shot in the back and fell into his home. His keys were still in the door. To me, that sounds like he wasn't a threat to the officers. What are your thoughts?
You know, I agree with you. He wasn't a threat, at least based on what we are hearing. You know, the family also said he was carrying a sandwich and he wasn't carrying a gun. And the shooting occurred in front of the grandmother and 2 toddlers. So if he's trying to enter the house, there are other people. Obviously, they could have gotten shot or even killed. And so I think that I'm concerned about this shooting. And it took place 5 days ago. You know, the autopsy report is oddly vague. It doesn't say what the trajectory of the bullets were. So I'm a little concerned that, you know, there might be some hidden, you know, things going on here. So at this point, we need all of the details about these bullets and what exactly happened at this shooting.
Agreed. And even the autopsy is very scant with information. It says torso. It doesn't say the front, the back, And while that might be small, that is a big distinction when it comes to use of force for officers. Dina, from what I'm understanding, this officer didn't have body camera. The report is saying that there were no other officers as witnesses, and the family is merely kind of not saying that they saw it firsthand. It literally sounds like a he said, now he's dead situation. Is this a hard type of case to prosecute if they're looking to go after the officer?
I think it will be key to decide whether or not they can figure out if the bullet wounds were from the back or the front. That will help quite a bit in a trial. I mean, even assuming the police officer's account that he was waving a gun, I think this is an excellent example of how we need the de-escalation, because again, we have somebody who's killed for something that is not criminal, or if that is, it's a very small crime. So how this went from, even if he waved a gun, to him being shot and killed multiple times in the torso. This is why this kind of case is being brought national attention, and they're having a federal civil investigation as a result of it.
Exactly, and by all accounts, he was a registered gun owner and had a carry and conceal permit, so it's not that he was carrying the gun illegally from our understanding. Thank you both. When we come back, a mother missing, then found dead on the property of her former in-laws. The deadly custody dispute, next. And now to a hearing in Florida where attorneys for 3 members of a family charged in a murder of a Florida mother are trying to get evidence thrown out of their case. Nicole Montalvo disappeared last year after dropping her son off at the home of her estranged husband, Christopher Otero Rivera. He and his father, Angel Rivera, are charged with murder. His mother, Wanda Rivera, is charged with being an accessory. The defense says investigators initially obtained a search warrant for a missing persons case, but a deputy's canine partner found the victim's dismembered remains on the properties owned by the Riveras.
So as we began searching, he started showing changes in behavior, that there was a presence of human remains somewhere nearby. The wind was strong that day, and he kept air scenting, raising his head, trying to figure out where it was coming from. We searched one side of the property. There were some holes and some smoothed out earth that the detectives really wanted to hit first. So as we did that, he kept air scenting and wanting to go behind the property to the adjacent property. There was a fence line and a ditch. He kept wanting to go back there and go back there. That piece of property was not, we didn't know who owned it yet, so we couldn't go search it. So after he got tired, he was put back in the truck and passed my findings along that he was wanting to get somewhere, but I'm not sure where yet.
The victim's mother said she went to her daughter's apartment complex looking for her with the help of the detectives.
We were still standing outside waiting to get into her apartment. We were trying to determine if she was inside or not. And Detective Miller had come back because there was St. Cloud there and also Osceola. Detective Miller had come back and he was walking towards me with his phone, and he said, "We received a text message that Angel got from Nicole." And I said, "Can you tell me how the spelling is?" He said it was a lengthy one, text message. And I said, "Can you tell me what the spelling and stuff was like?" And he said, he was kind of like hesitant on showing me. And I said, "Because I'm telling you right now, this is the way my daughter texts." And I pulled up the text from Sunday night. And I showed him, and he said, "No, this is what I have."
Did he show it to you at that time?
Then he showed it to me, and I said, "That's absolutely not Nicole."
All right, so this isn't a trial, Terry, so let me try to figure this out. This is a suppression hearing. We're talking Fourth Amendment, search and seizure. They're trying to say that that right or that constitutional right was violated. I don't really see it there, though. Can you walk us through how you think this might play out?
Well, you know, Brian, the evidence is going to be suppressed if the judge believes that the evidence was obtained illegally. And what defense counsel is arguing here is that the search of the family's home and property, they're saying it was illegal because the detectives actually misstated some of the details in the affidavits. And one of those misstatements had to do with whether or not this was a kidnapping or whether it was a missing person. So if the judge finds that that affidavit was misleading, it could actually, keep the evidence suppressed, and that would be very damaging to the prosecution's case.
Dina, as I'm listening to this, I'm thinking, and I don't want to get too in the weeds with this, inevitable discovery. The officer or the prosecutor going to say, hey, we would have found this anyways. And that keen nose from the K-9 unit is what really led them to this body. What are your thoughts on how this suppression hearing could play out?
I imagine that the judge will allow this evidence in because, as you said, they were going to discover it anyway, and that whether or not it was a kidnapping or a missing person, both would still be valid basis for the search warrant. But it's important for the defense attorney to file this, and the reason why is because obviously without this search, all of this evidence wouldn't have come in. This is where they found the body. The whole case would go away. So they have to preserve this issue for even just for appeal, because if they lose here and have a trial, they'll still get a chance to appeal this and say it wasn't adjudicated properly, and so if he is convicted, that gets thrown out.
Yeah. I mean, who was it? Michael Jordan, who says you miss every shot you don't take. And as a defense attorney, you've got to take that shot, even if you think there's a likelihood of it not being made in. Of course, we're going to keep following this case. I think the hearing results, the judge says, will get back to us in about a month. I think both of us or all three of us are thinking that this will likely not get suppressed. Is that right, Dina and Terri?
Absolutely. Right. I think it's going to get
I'm seeing head nods. Yeah. And then after that, we just figure out whether or not it's a guilt or innocence question. Thank you very much for joining me, ladies. And thank you for joining us here on Law and Crime Daily. We will see you next time as we discuss justice in America.